We're going to talk briefly about the evolving role of prescriptions. Remember that prescriptions are actually the sharp end of the spear when it comes to healthcare. It is the thing that people use the most in their health benefit. You go to a hospital less than once a year, you go to your doctor on average less than twice a year, you use your pharmacy benefit about 12 times a year. So people know healthcare through the prescriptions. And as you know, because of the rising cost of prescriptions, this is just recent data published a couple weeks ago, prescription drugs are becoming a bigger and bigger part of the total healthcare spend. So where you often hear this number that's only 10% of healthcare spend, Aaron Kesselheim and others found that it's actually now up to 20% of healthcare spend. And for our plans, it's about 19%. So this is a pretty consistent number. So this idea that it's been 10% of healthcare spend, will always be 10% of healthcare spend is actually not true. And what's really happening is this. If you look at the donut on the left, that donut represents about $350 billion in spend, and Doug will correct it if I'm wrong, but in 2015, the country spent about $315 billion on pharmaceutical products. What you see in the orange slice is for specialty drugs. That's 1 to 2% of the nation's population taking these specialty drugs, but they're spending 30 cents on any dollar. If you just fast forward to 2018, which is just 2 years from now, we're going to be spending $500 billion for pharmaceuticals. And that 1 to 2% of people that have a specialty disease really doesn't change. But their percent of the total healthcare of the pharmacy spend goes up to 50%. So 2% of the population will be spending 50%, 98% of the rest of the population will spend the other 50%. So if you're a payer for healthcare, you're a major employer, you're an insurance company, this is what you're thinking about, is what are you going to do to control specialty spend going forward. And the reason this is, part of the reason this is happening is this line chart. If you look at what has happened over the last 7 years, and you look at the middle line, which is the consumer price index, we have lived in a phenomenally low inflation period. Inflation is up over those 7 years by about 14%. If you look at the blue line going down, that's what's happened to generic prices over the last 7 years. They have actually continued to deflate. Generics, despite what you hear about the occasional Daraprim or EpiPen or other things, generics are down in price by 60% over the last 6 years. But what the scary part is what you see in the orange line, and that's what's happening with branded products that are in the marketplace. Branded products are up by 164%. There is no other business that you can think of where you've been able to take a price increase of 164% over the last 6 years. And so this is what has consumers really spun up, is that you now have more and more of the drug spend. So even though 90% of the dispenses are generic, 70% of the spend is for the branded products, because it's these 10, 15% of drugs that's really causing all the spend. And there's good news here, right? We live in an unbelievable scientific time. Between genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, all the other great things going on in science, we have a pipeline that has never been richer in my 35 years in healthcare. There are 7,000 products in human testing. So this is phase 1, 2, and 3. This is not preclinical. There are 7,000 products in clinical testing in the United States now, more than any time in my last 35 years. So when the pharmaceutical industry says, woe is we have nothing in the pipeline, when you combine pharma and biotech, there is a ton in the pipeline out there. And the FDA has actually been doing their job. So when people say, oh my gosh, we can't get anything through the FDA, that's not true either, right? So this looks at FDA approvals over the last several years, and what you see is that in 2015, the FDA approved more drugs than any time in the last 20 years. And so not only is there a great pipeline, but the FDA is actually allowing these products to get into the marketplace. And so we have a marketplace which is going through a renaissance similar to what you saw in the late 80s and early 90s of new products coming into the marketplace. But the other thing you need to notice is something that happened back in 2010. Prior to 2010, the majority of the approvals at the FDA were for traditional oral solid products. Those are the diabetes, the hypertension, the osteoporosis products. Starting in 2010, pharma figured out that you could actually have blockbusters even with small patient populations. And so there was a major shift in what was going on in drug discovery. And what you see is that it's been specialty products predominating, and you'll hear more about this a little later when we talk about orphan products, but it has been specialty products that predominate in the FDA approvals. And so what you see coming through and what you see in that pipeline of new drugs, at 7,000 products, many of them are for niche things. But these are previously unmet medical needs for really cool problems. Things that we never thought we'd ever be able to address. And so this is a great news story from discovery. It's a bad news story if you have to pay for it. Now, I won't give the FDA a free ride here. I will tell you that we are troubled, especially on the payer side, with some of the recent decisions. When you look at the approval of Addy, or you look at the approval of the recent Duchenne's drug, there is great concern amongst the payer community that the FDA is no longer sticking to its strict science principles when it comes to approving drugs. And this is being viewed very negatively in the payer marketplace. And so you may hear more about this today, but this is for payers becoming a true problem, because if you lose confidence in the FDA approval process, remember that's actually at the core of how many of your products were paid for in the past. If the FDA put their seal of approval on something, that this product was effective in a disease, many payers would therefore make sure they covered it. Now payers are saying, wait a second, I'm not sure I want to cover Addy. I'm not sure the FDA really looked at this correctly. I'm not sure I want to cover this drug. I'm not sure the FDA looked at it correctly. That is a horrible place for this country to be going. And so I put that out as a word of caution. The other thing that's happened is, as you know, is it's not just that if you have a branded product, you've been able to take increasing prices over the last several years, but the introductory price of new products has really gone sky high. So we just looked at the new products that came into the marketplace. Now remember, this is also an apples and orange thing. That is, you're seeing more specialty products at a higher percentage of the new releases. But what you see is the average drug, the monthly price, back in 2007 was $2,000. In 2015, the average monthly price of a drug coming to the market is $10,000. So when you add these things together, we're in a perfect storm for consumers. We have great new products coming to the market. The products that are existing in the market are going up at an incredible speed. New products coming into the market are also coming out at really, really high prices. You add one additional problem onto this, and that's what's happening in the generic pipeline. Historically, having generics out there gave us the headroom to afford new products. In the past, when I had one patient that had to go onto a high-cost specialty product, I could move 10 patients onto a generic drug. And so total drug spend, which is what the payers actually look for, because they don't look at it patient by patient, total drug spend was able to be held relatively flat because we could shift so many patients to generics. Now that we have generic fill rates at nearly 90%, I don't have 10 patients to move to generics. And so every new specialty patient drops right to the bottom line, and I see it. And so this is why plan sponsors are really upset. And when you look at drugs that will be going generic over the next several years, as a percent of the total, it's trivial. So while it's still billions and billions of dollars, it's not enough to actually create the headroom we need to pay for the next new cancer drug or hepatitis drug. And then we have these bad actors out there, right? There's no bigger jerk than Mark Scarelli. And so there's these people that really paint the industry in a horrible light. I understand these are the anomalies, but this is really a tragedy. When you have people like Mark Scarelli, or you have the Miley situation, these people are just outward profiteering in the marketplace, and this paints all of us in a negative light. Not just the manufacturers, not just the innovators, but even the PBMs and others get painted in negative lights like this. And so there is incredible anger in the marketplace. You know it. It's palpable out there. People are talking about drug prices like they've never talked about it before. And so it really started a couple years ago with the advent of a curative drug. I mean, this is really ironic, right? A great treatment. First time ever we could treat hepatitis C. So I'm a transplant kidney doctor. I've seen tons of these patients. The idea that we could cure these patients with a pill with nearly no side effects. And then most recently with the EpiPen, and the incredible price to be taken for that. And as you know, both the presidential cabinets are talking about this. This is not a good place to be. It's not a good place for you all to be. It's not a good place for us to be, because this really scares the marketplace. And if we're going to continue to have the greatest pharmaceutical and biotech industry in the world, but also have affordability and access, we have got to figure out our way through this, because otherwise we're in a non-sustainable situation, and that's not good for the patients, it's not good for the practitioners, it's not good for the payers, it's not good for anyone. And so what do we do about this? And so as a PBM, we take a holistic approach. That is, we cannot afford to waste money anywhere. That is, we've got to come up with innovative ideas to make sure the patients are getting the right drug at the right time at the right price, and that they're being surrounded by the right care. And so I'm going to go into a couple of examples that point this out. So we have tried to do very innovative things in a whole host of diseases to try to do what I consider value-based contracting. So which is much different than outcomes-based contracting. Now, outcomes-based contracting, everyone holds out as the holy grail. I will tell you that our systems today do not allow for very robust outcomes-based contracting. And if we keep waiting for outcomes-based contracting, we're going to be waiting an awful long time. But we can do what I would call value-based contracting. So let me give you some examples. So we'll go back to the hepatitis C story. Ignore the Harvoni line, the orange, for a second. When Sovaldi came to the market, it came to the market at $1,000 a tablet, 84 days, $84,000. Now remember that you could not take Sovaldi by itself. You had to take it with either ribavirin or Elysium. In 2014, the cost per cure was $140,000 per patient with those other drugs added. Now, I remember I was talking to a reporter from Bloomberg at the time. We were actually talking about biosimilars. He asked me, what did you think about the price of Sovaldi coming to the market? I said, this is a tragedy. Great drug. We've been telling our payers this is going to be available for the last 6 years. This is a tragedy because we cannot afford this. If you just simplify it and you say there's $100,000 to cure each patient, we have 3.2 million patients with hepatitis C, you would have to spend the entire U.S. pharmacy budget to cure those patients. It would be $320 billion. This is not sustainable, and I said I would do everything I can, and I know that we're not going to treat everyone simultaneously. It's just an astronomical amount of money to spend for one disease. And so we were going to do everything we can to move market share, get the price lower. And what really galled me was what you see on the right side. That is, in the European countries with our same lifestyle, they were getting offered discounts of 30% off. I have more patients than the country of the United Kingdom, and I can't get a discount. Yet the UK can get the drug for $57,000. Now, I have no problem with other countries down here getting it for $900. That's the right thing to do for these countries that can't afford it. But for other Western countries that live our lifestyle, right now, in the United States is 4.6% of the world's population. We're about 40% of world drug spend. We are somewhere between 50 and 70% of pharmaceutical profitability. We are funding all of innovation for the rest of the Western world. We need to figure out how not to have 300 million people fund that, but we need 600 million Westerners fund it. So obviously I was quite spun up, tried to come up with every idea. Then Gilead did something really cool. They came out with Harvoni. Harvoni was $95,000, and Gilead thought this should get them off our backs because they should be thrilled. No longer is it going to cost $140,000 per cure. It's only going to cost $95,000 per cure. We have done a great thing. And of course, I wasn't satisfied, still bitch and moan. And as you know, what happened is, shortly thereafter, Vicurapac came out. Now, Vicurapac was a competitor that was not as convenient to use. Harvoni was 1 tablet once a day. Vicurapac was 7 tablets, 4 in the morning, 3 at night. But again, just 84 days and equal cure rates. So what we did is we went to our plan sponsors and said, I can get you Vicurapac really, really cheap. And I know your one concern is going to be, can I get the patients to take all their pills? Because it's less convenient. So what we did, which was not reported, is that we actually guaranteed the adherence for our plans that took Vicurapac. So this is value-based contracting. I get you a low net price, but I'm going to guarantee the adherence. If the patient doesn't take all 84 days, I'll give you back all the money you've put into that patient. The other thing we did that wasn't reported, but we were really proud of, is we opened it up to treat everyone. Harvoni was so expensive that most insurers were only treating patients with advanced disease, stage F3 and F4. As a physician, I will tell you, I found that horrible. If my child had hepatitis C, do I want to wait till their liver's scarring before I start therapy? And the answer is absolutely not. And so what we did is, which wasn't covered very much, is we guaranteed the adherence and we made it available to everyone regardless of the stage. Now, a year and a half later, I can tell you the results. We were able to achieve 92% adherence rates for Vicarapac. And the way we did it is we actually created predictive models. I knew which patients were going to take the drug, which ones were going to need assistance. We gave them cell phone apps. We gave them, reminders. We were saving so much money, I could send someone out to their house and shove the pills down their throat if I had to. And so the bottom line is we got 92% adherence. We saved for our patients and our plans $1 billion in the first year. We've now treated 50,000 people with cure rates of about 96%. And so this is really good. So this is value-based contracting, right? This is Express Scripts also taking the risk with the pharmaceutical company, guaranteeing adherence, driving down the cost above and beyond just unit price. And today I'm proud to say that this is the only example you can find where a specialty drug is cheaper in the United States than it is in the rest of the world, or in other Western countries. So this is recent data from IMS, from Doug, that shows that we get actually a better price here now. We created a price war that saved the country about $4 billion last year for the treatment of hepatitis C. Now let's turn our attention to another topic that's actually really concerning the payers, and that's cancer. So as you know, oncology spend is going up dramatically. If you remember the pie chart, a quarter of the new drugs in the pipeline are for cancer, and so this really has plan sponsors quite worried. And as you know, just like for total drugs, this is data from Peter Bach that looks at what's happened to the introductory price of cancer products over the last 45 years, and what you see is those prices have gone up by about 100-fold over the last 45 years. Now you can say, well, Dr. Miller, they're justified. We're living longer. These drugs work better in cancer. We should be paying more. So Peter actually corrected it for survival, and what you see that over the last 15 years, it costs more now to get an additional month of survival than it did 15 months ago. I'm not saying that this is wrong, that the next month of survival isn't more expensive than the previous month of survival, but this is not sustainable, right? This is called diminishing returns, and there has to be an endpoint to this. We can't just keep spending more and more for an additional few days here and there. And so we've tried to figure out how can we do value-based contracting in the oncology space. So we developed something called indication-based reimbursement. And I'll give you an example of how this works. Let's take Tarceva for lung cancer. Tarceva is a great drug for lung cancer. Lung cancer, as you know, is devastating. If you give patients Tarceva versus placebo, what the graph shows, and this is the company's own graph, is that it prolongs survival by about 5.2 months. Pretty good result for lung cancer. Like all good pharmaceutical companies, they brought it to the marketplace at a premium price because it works so well. They then looked for other indications for the drug, and they showed that it also worked in pancreatic cancer. Now, you may not look at this and say it works. It prolonged life by 12 days in pancreatic cancer. Now, the irony here, though, is they charge the exact same amount for lung cancer as they do pancreatic cancer. Think about in your life, is there any product you buy that works 1/10 as well, but you pay the same premium price? You would say, no, this is a faulty product when it comes to pancreatic cancer. I shouldn't pay as much. But under our schema in the United States, we adjudicate drugs at the drug level, not the indication level. So we switched it around, and we said, you know what? We can now do this at the indication level. We're going to build the system so I can reimburse the pharmaceutical manufacturer differently for lung cancer than I can pancreatic cancer. Then you have federal regulations that trip you up, like Medicaid best price. They can't accept lower patient for reimbursement for pancreatic cancer because for the federal government it would screw up everything. They'd have to reimburse they'd have to only accept the lower reimbursement for any time Tarceva insurance. So what we did is we worked with companies, some of them in this room, on pancreatic cancer, on lung cancer, renal cancer and prostate cancer, where we are now doing indication-based blended reimbursement with them or some other schema that's giving value to payers. So I'll give you one example. IRISA for lung cancer. We did a deal with AstraZeneca where if you try IRISA for a month and you don't stay on it for a second month because of either side effects or lack of clinical response, you get 100% of your money back. Okay, so we give them a low price, we give them a low unit price, but we are also giving them a value-based contract because you can now try it risk-free. The lung cancer doctors love it because we're not narrowing the formulary on it, so they can still choose whatever they want. But should they choose IRISA, it's risk-free to their patients to try. And so you can imagine how much more market share they're getting because of that. And we have contracts similar to that, like I said, in renal cancer and prostate cancer. So again, it's this concept of doing value-based contracting. To do this, we've actually gotten some help. Steve Pearson and ICER, Peter Bach from Memorial Sloan Kettering are assisting us. Remember, when we're contracting with you all, we're not trying to get the ICER price. We are just using ICER to inform us what those ranges should be, but believe me, ICER does not set the price for Express Scripts. The other reason we're able to do this is, remember, we're set up a little different. Just like with hepatitis, I have specialist pharmacists that do just hepatitis. It made a huge difference in getting patients to be adherent to hepatitis. I have specialist pharmacists in cancer. In fact, we have 5 different cancer, what are called therapeutic resource centers. If your child has pediatric cancer, the only pharmacist you'll talk to at Express Scripts is a specialist in pediatric cancer. In fact, they have more experience than even the oncologists because they're supporting MD Anderson and Sloan Kettering and Memorial and Fox Chase and Siteman and all the other great cancer centers around the United States. Because of that, we're keeping more people on first-line therapy than others do, and this is why pharma is willing to do these deals with us. Most recently, starting January 1st, we're doing something really unique in inflammatory disease, and that is we're using the same indication-based reimbursement, but we're using it for the anti-inflammatory drugs. This is actually the #1 spend category for employers in the United States. So it has passed diabetes and heart disease as the #1 spend area, even though it's a very small number of people. And remember, the average prescription here is about $3,000. And so when you talk about it, it also sets us up for biosimilars, but we won't go into that today. But this is the different buckets of anti-inflammatory, and I know this is an eye chart for you. What I just want to show you is we have figured out a way to split the anti-inflammatories into 7 different classes. Why this is important is because we're trying to break the stranglehold of rebates in the marketplace, and we can talk about this further. But one of the things that really has the marketplace very upset, both at us and at everyone else, is this vicious rebate game that's out there. But by breaking it up into 7 different buckets, we're able to actually prefer drugs and not give up the rebates across all these diseases, which is really important. And so this continues to give the rheumatologists, the GI docs, and others free rein to choose the drugs they want. But what we've been able to arrange in this segment is something really unique. And that is, you now can try one of these drugs risk-free for 3 months. And what I mean by that is, the average patient that gets put on one of these TNF inhibitors or other drugs, 25% of them switch to another drug. If you're an Express Scripts member, if you switch in the first 3 months, you will get back 2/3 of what's been invested in your care. So if it's on average $3,000 a month, you'll get $2,000 a month back. So if the first month you stay on the drug, second month you switch after the third month, you'll get $6,000 back. And so it's like the cancer thing. We're doing value-based contracting where physicians and patients can try drugs with a much lower risk financially. And so we believe that this is a value-based contract. It delivers value-based to the marketplace. It gives people a lot of choice, but it actually will drive market share to those companies that are participating in this. So I'm going to end with the following, and that is, how do we break this cycle? How do we get to sustainability? What do we all in this room have to do before the regulators step in and do it to us? Because I will guarantee you that if we leave this up to either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, they will not do it as well as the free market can do it. So I'm going to give you a couple recommendations. If you're a pharmaceutical company, here's what I recommend. And you will not see in my slides price controls, government intervention, or anything else. Number 1 is we got to show better judgment. And that is, we know what it looks like. It's hard to regulate it. You know, when Roy Vagelos was running Merck, Merck was the most admired company in the world 7 years in a row. And Dr. Vagelos, back in the late 80s, when drug prices were going up high like they are now, took what was called a CPI pledge. He pledged never to raise the price of a Merck product by more than the consumer price index. He was able to stop this vicious cycle because of his leadership. And so we need leaders like him who are running pharmaceutical companies, not people who are profiteering, but actually understand the social contract we have to not gouge the marketplace when it comes to healthcare. We need to have biosimilars in the marketplace. Biosimilars will buy the same headroom that generics did in the past decade. We published a study where there's about $250 billion of savings in biosimilars in the next 10 years if we can get them into the US marketplace. I am very concerned they're going to be difficult to commercialize in the United States, but pharma has got to stand down and quit beating these guys up in court and let these products get to the marketplace, because this is going to buy the headroom for the next cancer drugs, the next hepatitis drugs, or the next cholesterol drugs. We have got to figure out how to change this international price disparity. We cannot have 300 million people supporting all drug discovery. We need 600 million Westerners able to do it. And we have to stop the patent games. What I mean by this is this pay for delay or evergreen. This keeps old products out there at a really high price. It keeps generic competition from coming out. And again, this will buy the headroom that will pay for your new discoveries. You have never heard me complain about the exceedingly high price for drugs for cystic fibrosis or hepatitis or hemophilia. We gladly pay it because it's worth it. But we have to be able to get total drug spend down. Now, what does the government need to do? Number one is the government needs to better fund the FDA. The FDA does a great job. And I'll repeat that. The FDA does a great job. But they are vastly under-resourced. Because what you'd really like to do is you'd like to see drug approvals happen faster, not slower. Because the reason hepatitis prices came down was not because the first drug came to the market or the second drug. It was when the third drug came to the market. Every drug should be treated as breakthrough. Every drug should be rushed to the marketplace if it's safe, because that's when we can do our job and create competition and get prices down. We need to boost NIH funding. There are certain diseases that no one wants to chase. I'll give you a great example. We have a dearth of antibiotics coming to the marketplace. We really need new antibiotics. The NIH can actually earmark discovery areas, and when they do, they allow those discoveries to be shipped out of the NIH into private industry to make new companies. It's what's been an engine for the United States in biotech and pharma. And so we need to have the NIH better funded. We need to reform our patent system. That is it right that a drug that, when you look at the difficulty of bringing biosimilars to the marketplace, much of it is around the patent system and all the myriad of patents that are out there. We need to give you all some protection from malpractice. Just like we have these vaccine programs that shield you from suits for late complications of vaccines, there are going to be drugs like for Alzheimer's where you may be on them for years and you may not know the side effect profile that occurs late. And so patients need to be protected, but you all need to be shielded from some of these lawsuits, and there has to be ways to do it. And if we're going to have PCORI, we need to bring cost into the consideration. That is, PCORI is the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. In my mind, it's a total waste of money right now. Because what happens is they're not able to consider cost. By the time they publish anything, medical science has moved far past what they're doing. That money should either be reallocated to the NIH and the FDA, or they need to be able to consider cost in the equation. We're the only country that doesn't do cost effectiveness. And finally, what do payers need to do? We payers need to continue to pay. That is, we can't expect this is going to be free, and we have got to be willing to pay, and we got to pay fair prices for you all. And that's why I've said, I don't complain about the cystic fibrosis drugs. I don't complain about hemophilia drugs, because we've got to pay for those things. But we also have to have rational benefit designs, and what I mean by that is the co-pays for patients has to be affordable. These high deductible health plans are designed for rich people. They're sold to poor people. Those families are playing roulette with their family's health each and every year because they're just one disease away from medical bankruptcy. And so we've got to figure out how to cap co-pays on drugs if we're going to be able to have the system. We have to advocate for policy change, and we're all going to have to work together if we're going to solve this without government intervention. So I'm going to stop here, but I just want to remind you, rising pharmacy costs are going to really challenge us all. And it's really the specialty drugs, and so managing it so that we don't waste any money is going to be crucial if we're going to get out of this problem and have a sustainable situation. PBMs can do things today, like value-based contracting and eventually outcomes-based contracting that will be helpful, but we shouldn't hold our breaths until we can do outcomes-based contracting. And we have to we're going to have to rebalance how we think about innovation and pharma ROI, because we've got to get to sustainability. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you having me.